In a small courtroom tucked inside a quiet American suburb, Judge Karen HOA, known for her sharp tongue and frequent outbursts, was having a typical morning on the bench. She often carried herself with an air of superiority, quick to judge and quicker to scold. That day, a soft-spoken woman in plain clothes stood before her, calmly stating her case. Without warning and with no solid evidence, Judge HOA accused her of lying under oath. What Judge HOA didn't know was that this unassuming woman was married to one of the highest-ranking officers in the state police, and he was already on his way to the courthouse. The woman stood still, her face calm but her eyes focused. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she quietly reached into her purse and pulled out a neatly folded document, an official subpoena that had already been processed by the district attorney's office. Judge HOA glanced at it, scoffed, and waved it off as irrelevant. "I've seen enough," she snapped. "This is a clear case of perjury. Bailiff, detain her for contempt of court." Gasps filled the room. A few people in the audience whispered, unsure if they had just witnessed a mistake or something far more serious. Before the bailiff could take a single step, the courtroom doors swung open with authority. A tall man in a dark suit, decorated subtly with insignia of law enforcement, entered. His badge was visible, his posture unshakable. The chatter stopped. He walked straight to the bench, not breaking eye contact with Judge HOA. "Judge," he said calmly but firmly, "I'm Officer Marcus Dean. That woman is my wife, and you've just made a very serious error." Judge HOA blinked, her confident expression faltering for the first time. The room fell into complete silence. Even the ticking of the old wall clock above the judge's bench seemed to have paused. Judge HOA straightened in her seat, suddenly aware of the weight of her robe, and the eyes of the entire courtroom now fixed on her. "I wasn't informed of any affiliation," she said, her tone attempting to recover its usual control. Officer Marcus Dean didn't smile. "You didn't ask." He turned to the bailiff. "Stand down. No one touches her." The bailiff hesitated for a split second, then lowered his hands, glancing back at the judge for reassurance he never received. "Your Honor," Marcus continued, his voice as steady as a loaded gun, "you accused my wife without reviewing all the submitted evidence. You ignored a subpoena verified by the district attorney's office. You attempted to detain her unlawfully. That's not just bad judgment, that's abuse of authority." Judge HOA reached for her gavel, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of desperation, but her fingers hovered, uncertain. "I suggest you stop this proceeding right now," Marcus said, "and step aside until legal counsel is present. I've already contacted Internal Affairs." A murmur spread across the courtroom like a ripple in water. The court clerk subtly stopped typing. A reporter sitting in the back started scribbling furiously in her notebook. The woman, Marcus's wife, remained where she stood, calm, quiet, but in her silence, there was strength. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to defend herself. The truth was doing it for her. Judge HOA slowly leaned back in her chair. Her confidence had slipped, but her pride hadn't. Not yet. "This court is in recess," she said through clenched teeth, and banged the gavel once. But this wasn't over. As the room began to clear, Marcus stepped beside his wife, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. "She's not the first person you've treated like this," he whispered loud enough for Judge HOA to hear, "but she will be the last." Back in her chambers, Judge HOA paced furiously. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from a sense of slipping control. For years, she had ruled this courtroom like a private kingdom. No one had dared challenge her authority. Until now. She picked up the phone and dialed. Get me Ronald. Now. On the other end, her longtime ally and defense attorney Ronald Blake answered, his voice low and tired. Karen? What's going on? I just got wind of something. Internal affairs. There was a misunderstanding in court today, she snapped. A woman, some cop's wife, tried to play games with me. There was a pause. You mean Marcus Dean's wife? Ronald's voice dropped. Karen, you don't pick a fight with Marcus Dean. He's got friends all the way up to the state attorney general. If he says you crossed a line, you'd better believe people are going to listen. Judge HOA didn't respond right away. Her eyes narrowed at her reflection in the darkened window. I've handled worse, she said coldly. They're bluffing. But even she could hear the doubt creeping into her own voice. Meanwhile, down in the courthouse parking lot, Marcus and his wife sat quietly in their car. The woman stared straight ahead, her hands folded on her lap. You didn't have to come, she finally said, her voice soft. I didn't come for you, Marcus replied. Then, after a pause, he added, I came for justice. She turned to look at him. It's not over yet, is it? He shook his head. Not even close. Judge HOA's going to fight. People like her don't just give up, they double down. But we're ready now. And this time, we're not alone. Just then, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I have information. Meet me tonight. Bring no one. She's been hiding more than you think. Marcus stared at the screen, jaw tightening. He showed the message to his wife. Looks like someone wants to help us bring her down. She nodded slowly. Then we go. Later that evening, the city skyline flickered under a heavy sky. Rain was threatening, hanging like a curtain about to fall. Marcus parked the car 2 blocks from the meeting point, a rundown diner on the edge of the industrial district. Neon lights buzzed in the window. Inside, the only customer sat in a booth near the back, wearing a faded hoodie and keeping their face low. Marcus entered alone as instructed. The man didn't look up right away. He stirred his coffee, then slid a small envelope across the table. She buried more than bad rulings, the man said quietly. Judge HOA has a history, sealed complaints, suppressed testimonies. She didn't just abuse power. She erased anyone who got in her way. Marcus opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of old affidavits, blacked out police reports, and a familiar name. Elena Ruiz, a public defender who had gone missing 5 years ago during a heated case. One Judge HOA had presided over. You think she was involved in that? Marcus asked, voice low. The man gave a slight nod. Not directly, but her hands were on the wheel. That case never made it to trial. Files vanished. Witnesses backed out. Elena filed a judicial misconduct complaint. Then she disappeared. Marcus's jaw clenched. And you? Who are you? The man finally looked up. His face was gaunt but familiar. Calvin Ruiz, Elena's younger brother. I've been waiting for someone to go after her. You've got visibility. I've got receipts. Marcus took a breath, looked out the rain-streaked window, and nodded slowly. Then we bring her down. Together. Meanwhile, back at Judge HOA's home, she sat in her dimly lit study, reading an email on her private laptop. The subject line was chilling. They've found Elena. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen. Outside, a car sat parked across the street, engine idling. Inside, a camera clicked silently from the passenger seat, capturing every move through her window. Someone else was watching, and they weren't with Marcus. The next morning, The courthouse buzzed with an air of tension. Marcus and Calvin had worked tirelessly overnight, compiling evidence, making calls, and preparing their strategy. They weren't just going to take down Judge HOA. They were going to expose the corruption that had been festering for years. The truth was finally coming to light. As Judge HOA entered the courtroom for her usual morning session, the atmosphere felt different. There was a quiet murmuring among the staff, the bailiffs, even the court reporters. They all knew something was coming, but none of them knew what. Just as she was about to take her seat, the door to the courtroom opened, and a group of officers filed in, led by a familiar face. Officer Karen Blake, one of the senior investigators from the Internal Affairs Division. "Your Honor," Karen began, her voice carrying across the room, "we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to cover up a missing persons case." The room fell into stunned silence. Judge HOA's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak but stopped, realizing that any defense would be meaningless. The evidence was too damning. The room, once her domain, now felt suffocating. "We have everything," Karen continued, her voice steady. "Files, witness testimony, and a sealed confession from someone you thought you could silence. The truth is out." Marcus stepped forward, his gaze unwavering as he looked directly at Judge HOA. "You may have thought you could control the system, but you underestimated the people you hurt, and the ones who would stand up for them." Judge HOA's eyes flickered with something. Fear, regret, perhaps both. But before she could respond, the officers moved in to handcuff her. As she was led out of the courtroom, the weight of her fall from grace was palpable. For the first time, she was not the one in control. The truth had caught up to her. Outside the courthouse, the air was thick with rain. Marcus, Calvin, and the woman, his wife, stood together, watching the police car drive off. The sky had cleared just slightly, enough to reveal the first rays of morning sunlight. Marcus turned to his wife, his expression softened. "It's over." She nodded, squeezing his hand. "For now. But there's still work to do." Calvin glanced at the two of them. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Marcus smiled, though the weight of the battle wasn't over. "Yes, but now we're ready." And as the first rays of light pierced through the clouds, a new chapter began. One where the law would once again be a shield for the innocent, not a weapon for the powerful.